Welcome to the Hybrid Human Podcast. My name is Zach Ryan, and each week myself and my co-host Chase Price will be exploring the intersection of wellness, business, entrepreneurship, and more.
Get ready to learn, grow, and evolve with us on the Hybrid Human Podcast. Let's rock with this.
Let's do it.
What's up, brother?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good. We got the new setup going.
Yeah.
I like this. We're a little bit far apart, but...
We were joking. I feel like you're in a different zip code.
Yeah?
Like it's, this is far.
Hopefully our convo is a little more connected than we are right now.
Yeah.
I like this though. I'm curious to see how it's going to look, how it's going to come out, but I'm excited about it. And then if we have a guest next time by, they'll be right in the middle and it should balance out nicely. So
Next week.
Next week we're going to start that up. So, but this week, this is episode 5. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I believe 5.
Episode 5. This is a big one that I'm excited to talk about. First and foremost, because I'm in the midst of doing this a little bit for myself, and you are kind of in the same boat with me, and we're talking about personal branding. And when we talk about personal branding, I want to touch on a variety of things, but first and foremost, why you should just be unapologetically kind of yourself, regardless of what you're jumping into and what kind of branding you're trying to do. And it's something that is never completed. It's a work in progress constantly, at least for me. Even though I post videos almost every day at this point, I still every once in a while will get like a little bit of hesitation to post something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think we all feel a little bit of that. So I'm excited to jump into this topic today because it's something that I work closely with on a day-to-day basis in my business and also in my personal life as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good jumping off point is like with that tee up of understanding you're going down this path personally, but as well as like professionally. And I would say you're helping a lot of other people go down that path through your business. So I would love for you to kind of walk through like, as you look at personal branding from a Chase Price, the person perspective, how do you look at it from a business perspective? Because I think they're very similar, but also different. Like to your point, you've transitioned, and we've talked about this for 4 episodes at this point, but you transitioned from that travel vlog into fitness, more so from a content perspective. So that transition leads you into your personal brand and what you're creating in that community. So I would love for you to kind of give the audience and the listeners like an understanding of, what's your why behind it, first of all, but how are you like planning, how are you coming up with strategies and how are you executing on those strategies?
Yeah, I'll take it back a little bit. So even, when I was doing the traveling thing, I was building a personal brand, but I was so green. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like trying to post cool pictures of where I would go. And at the time that was like, get on a rooftop, have a 6 sunset in the background in like a foreign country. And that was the formula to grow at the time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really so much about messaging, about what you're putting into your captions, things like that. It was just like, post sick pictures. And so things have changed so drastically. I mean, I don't even know if video was a thing on Instagram at the time. Maybe it was starting to emerge. I know it certainly wasn't vertical video. It was like the wide horizontal things. And that was more my expertise. So I had to kind of get creative and lean into the photo space a little bit. But this past year, I use this analogy whenever I talk about this is like, my business, Redefine You, has been building personal brands and business brands, basically creating, what messaging they want to put out in the world for 5-6 years at this point. And I know what the formula is. We've done it time and time again for our clients, for our partners. And I was like, man, I feel like a country music songwriter in Nashville because I'm just teeing up hit after hit. I'm writing, I'm in the studio, I'm working with these artists and, they're taking the writing and they're putting it out there and they're blowing up, they're crushing it. I'm the ghostwriter. And then I'm like, dude, I know the formula. Like, why am I not doing this more for myself? At least experimenting. Like if I burn out, I burn out, but like, let me try this because I do want to share my expertise and, my passion about these certain things. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start singing. I'm gonna see if I got a little voice here. And that's kind of the metaphor that I use because it relates so much. But that's just been a journey for me. And now I'm leaning into, okay, more than just being consistent and more than just putting out dope stuff. what am I really trying to do? Where you're saying like, what's your why?
Yeah.
And for me, the why is the most important, because without the why, anybody who's posting consistently or even really good quality stuff, they're gonna burn out. They're gonna burn out pretty fast, actually. You know, if you don't have a reason behind what you're putting out and you don't have something, a core belief to go back to time and time again, when you're like, fuck, I don't feel like putting something together. I don't feel like ideating, or I don't feel like, you know, going out and shooting today. If you don't have that why, it's easy to say, all right, fuck it, I'm not gonna do it today.
Yeah.
But with a why, you're like, all right, I know this is a grind, but this is how it goes. And you have to find that passion and that why that keeps you going in those tough times. So for me, it's more about just sharing what I love with everybody else. And every once in a while, you know, I like to post these with permission, but like I'll get a message from somebody every once in a while about how I inspired them, or they saw my stuff and like it motivated them to go run a mile. Like I was doing this run a mile thing for last year for like 451 days in a row. Yeah. I got injured. It stopped, but like people started following that and they were like, dude, you got me to run a mile for like 30 days. And even that is like monumental for somebody who doesn't run at all, who's gone from couch to like mile a day or something like that. So those little messages and those positive reinforcements are what truly keep me going. And beyond that, it's just fun for me. Like I get to marry my two passions, which is fitness and creativity, on a daily basis. And that keeps me fueled and keeps me moving forward.
You bring up an interesting point that I have not thought of prior to this, but like it's almost in a sense that as you're building your personal brand, you're more impactful to a broader community as you're being authentic to yourself, obviously, but as you're bringing things to the table, like, hey, I'm going to start running for a day. You're doing it to make yourself better. And this is kind of the theme of this podcast, it seems like, but you're doing things to make yourself better. But as you do that, you're impacting others. Perfect example is running a mile a day for 451 days before a 100-mile ultra marathon race that took you out. But dude, it's really interesting to think about, is like, as you do these little things, and I wouldn't say that you were overly intentional at that time of building a personal brand. You were just dedicated to you, dedicated to yourself, dedicated to running a mile a day. But in the process, you're like, hey, I'm inspiring these people. These people are hitting me up and doing these different things to, like, you know, join the community, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of said, hey, I'm building something here. Let me go for it. So it's just interesting, you know, correlation between the two, I guess, to say, hey, as you're making yourself better, it's also a really good way to build a personal brand, because people are seeing like, hey, Chase cares about this. This is authentic to him. He's a runner. He cares about running a mile a day. Like, that's impactful, and I want to join. Yeah.
Two things off that is, one, you never know who's watching you and who is actually resonating with your content. There's so many people, especially in the world of social media, that like, they're never going to like, comment or, you know, message you personally, but like, you affect them on a daily basis. We all probably have that one influencer or person online who we look up to, but we've never really interacted with their stuff. We're just like, this guy's the shit, you know, but we don't necessarily interact with them. There's people just like that for smaller audiences. You know what I mean? That it might be somebody you went to high school with or something like that. Totally. You know what I mean? So, and the other thing with that is, you can say the same message 1,000 times, but it may take 1,001 times for it to actually hit home for somebody else. Yeah. So I've heard this before, and I try to kind of recreate this in my content. Is like, you don't need to say 1,000 things. You need to say one thing 1,000 different ways, because it's going to resonate with somebody that 1,000th time. Yeah. Maybe, you know what I mean?
A little bit different.
Or just a little bit different. We all have those people in our life who have told us something for like years and years, but then we hear it from somebody else and we're like, you know what? You're right. Yeah. But like, for some odd reason, it wasn't working when your mom was telling you it, but now your buddy tells you it, or somebody you see online tells you it, and it hits, right? Yeah. So being intentional about your messaging, and not just talking to talk, but talking about something that matters, and just being, you know, not going for quantity necessarily, but good quality and consistent message.
Yeah, you bring up, it's funny, in preparation for this podcast today, I was thinking of like, what are some strategies that work from a personal branding perspective? If I were to really dive into, which I have not necessarily as heavy as you have or others, but if I were to really dive into wanting to build a personal brand on social media or in the community or wherever it is, like, what are some things that would really stick out? And I wrote a few strategies down, but One of them, and you bring it up, is consistency. And it's not just consistency, with the content you're putting out and the message you're putting out, but it's consistency across platforms. For example, if you do it on IG, do it on Twitter, do it on YouTube, do it on Spotify in terms of a podcast. But also consistency, with frequency. Like to your point, when you started the podcast, you've been posting almost every day, or I think you have posted like every day for the last couple of weeks in some capacity, whether it's a story or an actual post.
Yeah.
And that's impactful. Like as you go down the path of building a brand, whether it's a personal brand, a business brand, whatever, like that is impactful to be consistent with your frequency. Every single day, I'm going to post some sort of impactful content to the community or drop some knowledge on, Instagram or whatever it is. And that continues to snowball and becomes a bigger thing down the road.
Yes. Yeah. Great points brought up. A couple of things, strategies that I do try to implement. One you brought up that I'm really bad at, that I try to be good at, but it falls off, is across all multiple brands. Like I do this pretty much, I create my reels. Instagram is my primary platform. So I'm creating for reels essentially. I will repost on TikTok. I don't put any effort in. I copy the message, the caption that I put on Instagram. I upload the video and I just send it. Yeah. If it does well, it does well. I don't really care. I should be also doing this on YouTube, Shorts. There's also new platforms coming up like Lemonade. I don't know if you ever heard of that. That's a new one. There's these just like, and that leads me to my next point is like, if something new comes out, us like as investing in our personal brand, we should be jumping on that, because you never know what's going to be the next thing that like spreads like wildfire, even if it's short-lived. Let's say Vine, for example, it was short-lived, but there's like hundreds of really quality creators that got their start on Vine and they got their audience on Vine and then transitioned to YouTube or Instagram or whatever it is. So if you can be first to platform, that's why as soon as like Instagram broadcast, for example, came out, and I found out about it, I started a channel because I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be, but I'm going to experiment and I'm going to start to try and like build a little bit of a community here. Right. Yeah. So being first to platform and like actually investing. And the thing is like you're investing, but it's already content that you're putting out anyway. So it's not like you're doubling effort. You're really just kind of adding on to your plethora of like network that you already have. Yeah. And go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say it's a good point. And I'm thinking of it from a corporate perspective as well. Like how important is speed to market in your eyes in the sense of personal branding from a, social media persona? I won't say influencer, but persona.
Yeah, we have a challenge with this with some of our corporate clients because corporate has like a structure of like, all right, we create their content for their social media calendar. They have to go and approve it. It takes like, a month in advance to approve their social calendar to get posted and to go out. It's really important to capitalize on trends. That's a big way to grow quickly, is to capitalize on trends. So as a personal brand, that's easy because you're the only person, there is no red tape. You just say, hey, I want to post this. It's funny.
Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah. Whereas with corporate clients and some of our other partners, it just takes more time and it's harder. So I think capitalizing on those things is super important. And the other thing is just being personal, like not just being this person where you throw up a picture, once a week and then talk about your struggles. Like you should get on your story and you should have FaceTime on your story. This is probably the most underrated thing I think people do, is they don't go and speak to their stories. You don't have to necessarily make it a full-time post, but like if you want to grow your audience and you want to connect with them, how are they going to connect with you if they're not like interacting with you, having conversations, quote unquote? When you're going and talking on your stories about whatever it is, it doesn't really matter what it is, but like people are going to get that FaceTime with you, feel like they're connecting one-on-one with you. It's the same thing how you'll listen to a podcast and feel like you know these guys and they don't know you from Adam, right? But you've listened to that maybe hundreds of their podcast episodes and you're like, I freaking love that guy or that girl, whoever it is. It's the same thing with Instagram stories. So you should really be speaking to your audience and just sharing what's on your mind, whether it's, related to your niche, ideally. But just getting some FaceTime is super important too.
Totally agree. And it brings up another thought of, how important is like a tagline when you think of a personal brand, for example, or even a business, right? I think of like BPN comes to mind, go one more. great message, like great message, 3 words, but extremely impactful. And you look at the community built behind it and, the branding, et cetera, really impactful. Yeah. Or, Brian Mazza, his partnership with 10,000 of nothing changes if nothing changes. Simple, very, very impactful as well. Like how important is having sort of a tagline or like a mission statement, if you will, within your personal brand?
I think it's important. It's something I'm not gonna lie, like I don't have one, and I have actively been trying to brainstorm and like think about how I can incorporate it. There's a fine line between like having a strong defining statement and being cheesy, right? It's really super easy to get super cheese on that sort of thing. And it's like a little cringy. You're like, oh, that's what you went with. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
For me, I don't want to force something just to have like a mission type, not even a mission statement, more of, a slogan per se. If one happens naturally and like I want to think about one, and I do want to implement one, and continue to build that way people who do follow you can connect with you in that way, whether it's a hashtag, maybe it's just like, for example, like Chase Trains or something. Yeah. If they've been rocking with me for 3-4 years, maybe, they do their mile a day and they put the hashtag Chase Trains on it. And that way there's that little community that's being built or whatever. But that's a good way to, again, kind of solidify that community, build that community, let other people kind of find it and realize this isn't just, a flavor of the month thing. Like there is something behind this that people actually resonate with. Yeah,
that's a good point too. Like you really need to understand and know who your target audience is and what they're looking, to get out of your content. Because there's a million or hundreds of millions of people on all these social media platforms that probably post something fairly similar. So how do you, differentiate yourself between the next running page or hybrid, athlete page or whatever it is? I think that's something that people maybe not overlook, but underestimate the importance of when they go down this personal branding path is like, let me post, X, Y, and Z piece of content. But if they're just posting it to post, it's probably not going to do that well unless they understand who follows me, like who is my audience today? Who am I trying to target to grow my audience? And there's all these different things that go into it. I think that's something that maybe is, underestimated a bit.
I think people go too broad. I think niching down is the best thing you can possibly do. You think it's kind of counterintuitive because you think niching down, you're going to have less of an audience, but actually you'll find more of a diehard audience that way because people are like, oh, he's in my lane. Like he only talks about ultra running, for example. Like this is my guy. This is my resource. This is my trusted source for, where I'm trying to experiment, gear, nutrition, all this stuff. You could be that person for an individual. Whereas if you go super broad, it's a little bit harder to connect for these people that are super niched into their little thing. Because everybody has their own thing, right? Like maybe it's Ironman, triathlete training, triathlon training, or maybe it's ultra running, or maybe it's marathons, maybe it's 5Ks, who knows? But like, I think the more that you can niche down, the better. Easier said than done because, oftentimes there'll be trends and stuff that come along, but you just have to figure out how to incorporate the trend into your lane. And it's very simple. Once you start thinking about it like that, it's like, don't just go do a dance because the dance is trending. Like, how does this trend or this dance, how can you like implement running into it in a certain capacity?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and that's the thing is like people flip the two, right? Where they're like, there's a trend, let me go try to, do this trend, whatever that may be, versus like, let me do my thing and continue being authentically myself. And if it happens to fit within this trend, great. Yeah. Then I'll pivot and I'll make some minor adjustments, but they're not going to change their entire, brand to do so. Mm-hmm. I think another thing that popped in my head when you were talking was take like social media influencers out of it. I think artists do this really well, where they say, a good example is Mike Stud, who used to be like a college frat rapper type of guy who put out remixes and all these different things, and took a couple years off, sort of more quiet, went more down the podcast lane, changed his name from an artist perspective to just Mike, and put out music that is totally different from 4 years ago. It's more like, not country, but more down that vibe of country music. And I think, corporations do this as well, where they go down a very niche path of, hey, we're going to be a cybersecurity company, or we're going to sell VPN, or pick something in the tech space. And then as they adopt customers, they turn into a platform. And our platform has different tentacles off of this core product that you know us for.
Right.
And we can transition and pivot and become a portfolio company. So I think from a corporate America perspective and from a social media or entrepreneurship perspective, like both, the rule applies to both avenues, where be niche, be you, be authentic, get known for one thing that you're really, really good at. As you gain traction, double down on that, but also expand into becoming a portfolio brand. Would you agree?
That's a great point. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it, but that's like a little bit further down the road as you grow. But that's a great point. I mean, think about, you brought up VPN. Like, I've been a client or a user of NordVPN for a long time. And then they came out with like this password keeper thing. And now I use that for my password. Now they have all this other shit. And I'm like,
Sure.
I trust this brand, so I'm just going to use them. And this is a VPN company. Like, there's nothing that's really connecting me to them other than they were the first brand that I actually used that provided this service, and I trust them now.
Yeah.
So it's the same type thing with a personal brand, and say, hey, this guy, you know, he did ultras for years and years and years. Now he's dabbling in Ironman stuff. Let me go watch his YouTube video and see like what trunks he's wearing for swimming and like what goggles he's wearing or whatever. And it just like branches out because you've built that core trust, and people will continue, unless you give them a reason not to. They're probably going to rock with you.
I totally agree. Yeah. And whether it's an artist or like, I can think of 3 or 4 brands off the top of my head that do that really well. Like Roca, for example.
Yeah.
Started off with one product. Now they have sunglasses and all these different gear for triathlons.
What was their first product? The goggles?
I think it was either goggles or sunglasses. One of the two. Cool. But they sell everything now. They got caps. They got, triathlon gear. They have, everything. So it's really interesting. And I think it kind of ties into the personal branding perspective really well. Which leads me to my next point, is like cultivating a really strong network. Talk to me about the importance of, as you go down this personal branding journey, the importance of your network. Because I think, when I think about it from a corporate perspective, building a personal brand internally within your organization is really important. I want to be known as somebody who has a strong work ethic, who, we say knows your brief, meaning like, your products, the process internally, you can help and you can provide a solid message. And I want to have a really good like brand internally with all these different things that are important to me. How do you sort of take that mindset from a personal brand perspective outside of the corporate lifestyle and more down the social media and entrepreneurship lifestyle, and make that like at the forefront of your strategies? Meaning, I am who I am today, but here's my network and here's how I can pull on different people to help advance me as I invest in my personal development.
Yeah, this applies to not just like creatives, but also people in corporate America, 100%. I'll give you a great example. My wife works for Bank of America, and they had a seminar and talking about what is your personal brand at Bank of America. And what they're talking about is, are you a person who dives in and is very trustworthy and like somebody that they can come with issues and you're going to help them find answers? Or are you like, just there's different sectors. I'm not that familiar with corporate America, but I thought this was really cool because everybody was like, they had this seminar and they were like, identify your core personal brand. Like, what do you want to be known for within the company? And how are you going to build upon those values? And as you continue to grow with us, grow those values and grow that personal brand of yours. And that was so cool to me because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like those conversations were not happening. Personal brand, that wasn't really a thing. It was more of like a selfish outlook or a creative outlook than anything else. And now big organizations are embracing it, which I think is really cool. Networking is a huge part of that. I mean, look at anybody you follow on social. The way they typically grow is through 2 avenues: partnerships with brands and their networking with other people of influence. They'll bring them in and then they'll do a podcast, for example, or they'll do, we follow a lot of fitness people. So they'll do a workout and they'll go like hang out for a day. And it's not just to have, I'm sure they're having fun, but it's also to build their branding and say, hey, you have an audience that probably identifies really closely with my audience. Let's go create some cool shit. And like, we'll cross kind of cross our platforms, cross our audiences, and see if we can kind of grow that way. So they all do it. I mean, that's how they're growing. Obviously they're continuing to put out good content and people find them organically here and there, but most of the time it's through their network and through their brand building with other brands that resonate with them. So it's huge. It's a little bit different for smaller folks like me and you, for example, because you still have to get that core traction about like what it is that you're doing, but you can network on a smaller scale and do the exact same thing. Like for me and you, it's like, we're going to continue to collaborate on posts and put that out. Hopefully your audience becomes mine and vice versa. It's a small place to start, but as we continue to have guests, we're going to do the same thing and say, hey, we're going to throw this post up. We're going to collaborate. We're going to write the caption, but like, are you cool with all that? And of course they're going to be like, yes, because everybody wants to grow their personal brand, right?
Yeah.
So finding, you know, what that core messaging is and then sharing it with other brands and platforms is a great way to grow that.
Yeah, totally agree. And that leads me to my next point is like, you know, the saying of feedback is a gift. How often do you pay attention to feedback, both positive and negative, on your posts? Like, are you looking at, you know, the analytics behind it? Like, hey, this post performed really well versus this post. A perfect example is the other day, which you may talk about, your dog.
Yeah.
That post went like semi-viral, like overnight.
It's doubled what it did the other day already.
It's hilarious.
It's still going.
It's hilarious versus like a piece, and you wrote like, hey, I spent 10 minutes on this.
Yeah.
Versus a piece that you spend, I don't know, 30 minutes or an hour, whatever, and make perfect with sync music and great transitions and all these different things. Like, kind of talk me through that. Do you ever look at the analytics behind what's doing well and what's not, and then tailor your, you know, content to those?
A little bit, but I don't create anything for the hope of it popping off. I create it because there's a core reason behind it, whether it's interesting to me or I think it's going to bring value to somebody else. But so funny story about that reel with Miley, who's my dog. I saw this trend and I was like, similar to exactly what we just talked about, is like, this was a trend for something else, but I was like, all right, I want to incorporate it with running because I think it actually fits. It makes a lot of sense. It was like a Forrest Gump soundbite or whatever. So I did it. It took me 10 minutes to make the video. It's more of like a skit type thing, and I never post anything like that.
Yeah.
So I honestly, this was a rare moment for me. I was very like hesitant to post it because I'm like, is this really like what I want to be putting out? But then I was like, it's on brand with what I'm putting out. It's funny. It's my dog. And I look at my core values, right? I post about 3 things: entrepreneurship, business, fitness, and my family is the other one, my dog and my wife, and like incorporating all that. And I was like, well, it's one of my pillars. It makes sense. I'm going to throw it up. And it ended up doing the best out of a video that I've done in a long, long time. And for me, that was just validation of like, cool, like whatever you find relevant and interesting, just go with your gut, because these hesitations and these things, I don't know the good word for it, but it's just like this hesitation, this being scared to post or whatever. It still comes for you from time to time, but you just have to stick with it and trust the process and be like, this is good. This is entertaining. It makes me laugh. And at the end of the day, that's all I care about. So somebody else is going to resonate with it. So I do look at the numbers, but am I going to go out and be like, I'm going to just do trending audio now? Like, no. But now I'm even more open to it. I just take it with a grain of salt because I'm like, I don't expect everything I do that's trending audio to pop off. But like, that was interesting. I take that data and then just think about other strategies and ways I can implement that.
Yeah. And I think it just comes down to like assessing how things are doing and adjusting if you want to, but staying true to your core pillars. You bring up a good point, and I want to double click on it. The fear of, or maybe it's not a fear, but the hesitation behind, maybe I won't post this, or maybe I shouldn't post this. Talk me through that, because to me, like, you post a lot. in a positive way. Like, you post a lot. So I'm like, okay, this is somebody who, is confident in his quality of the actual content, but also in the quality of the purpose behind the content. Those are 2 really important things. What about somebody who's just getting started? Like, they're going to have fear of posting anything. They're going to have fear of having their face on something. They're going to have fear of judgment, and not because they're any lesser than you or someone else. It's just human nature to feel a certain way when you're putting yourself out there in a way that you probably haven't in the past. So let's dive deeper into that. Like, what are some things that you do or have done to overcome that, and how can we sort of help the listeners who are trying to go down that path sort of get over that initial fear of that first post or that first series of posts?
It's definitely fear. It's fear of the red button. I've heard it called, and I like to call it now since I've heard that, is like fear of pressing the record button or pressing the post button, right? And it's not a fear of actually pressing the button, but it's a fear of people not supporting what you put out. A fear of putting it up and getting no love, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're all afraid of. And that takes time for sure. But like if you're doing all these other things, these core things that we're talking about, you're going to find people who are connecting with you, and they're going to find you one way or another, and they're going to start resonating with you. They're going to start showing you love. They're going to start commenting on your stuff. That goes two ways though. You can't be putting all this stuff out in the world and then not also reciprocating and doing the same. Like you need to go out and interact with these people as well. You need to reciprocate that energy because it's going to come back, but you need to also find these communities. Like for me, for a while, when I got into the fitness posting niche, which I was not doing, we've talked about, I was kind of in a travel vlogger type lane for a long time. And then I transitioned into, I want to post about fitness. I didn't have that core audience. I mean, I had a couple homies that would like comment here and there for support, but like for a while they weren't doing the best. And I continued to push through that. I'm still nowhere near where I want to be, but like there's a little bit more traction. People will comment, but it's because I've found community through running, through BPN, through personal just connections here in Charlotte of people who do similar stuff that I do. Like they run, they do endurance sports, things like that. So they're reaching out, but I'm also reaching back out and I'm reciprocating, and whether it's with them or whether it's different communities. So you need to do both, like continue to put out stuff and not worry about whether it pops off or not. And also do in real life interaction, or maybe not in real life, but like also find these communities online and like entertain them, reciprocate, like show them some love, because you can't expect everybody else to do it if you're not doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's something I figured out, because I was never somebody like, I'm introverted, and even online I'm introverted. So like, I'm not really somebody who's traditionally going out and commenting on everybody's stuff. I'm like, you rock, like, you know what I'm saying? And I think it's more about not doing anything like that. Don't throw up just emojis to just comment on people's shit. But like, if you generally connect with them and find value in what they're doing, or respect them, or you're stoked for them, like write that.
Yeah.
Just write something that actually is meaningful and genuine. And that's where you're going to find the people that are giving back to you.
That last sentence resonates with me so much. It's such a good point that in my mind, like authenticity is, essentially a vehicle to overcome that fear.
Yes, 100%.
You know what I mean? Authenticity is the vehicle to overcoming fear of whatever it may be, rejection or falling flat with a joke or a post or whatever it may be. I think if you're authentic to yourself, if you're authentic to the brand that you are cultivating in the community that you're creating, that doesn't matter. Like that's just noise. People are going to say whatever they want to say for whatever reason that they have. But if you're authentic to yourself, and if you're true to your North Star, your why, and you're doing things that A, you care about, and B, you find, potentially useful for your community, then like really, but who cares? Like someone's always going to have something negative to say. So, and it's easier said than done. Like I want to be, aware of that and not just overlook the fact that, it's difficult to post something, but if you can overcome that, first of all, you're in a great spot. Second, if you just stay authentic and true to yourself, I think that's a really good way to feel like, confident in what you're putting out in the world.
Yeah. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And it does come with time. But, I kind of want to ask you the same thing of like, you were really on it for a long time. You were in a flow and you were committed to like putting out a reel a week, and then you fell off. And I'm curious, what was your mindset? Like what caused you to kind of fall off, and where are you at trying to get back on? And how are you thinking about that?
I would say it was intentional. And we talked about this a little bit, that I was going to put out a reel a week leading up to Boston, really for two reasons. One was an accountability tool. Look back on Sunday when I would go to make the reel, like, did I do enough training this week? Do I have, documentation saying that I did it, and showing that I did it? Sort of a weird way for myself to hold myself accountable. And the second thing was, hey, I'm going to look back on this one day and remember the work that it took and the work that I put in to get to these goals. Like ultimately my goal is to run all 6 world major marathons. That's my ultimate goal with any of the fitness endurance situation. Like that is my ultimate North Star. With that said, you know, coming out of Boston, I was A, injured, and B, I got COVID, was super sick, whatever. That was part of the reason why I stopped as well. It was like, hey, you know, I'm going to document the training until we get to Boston. After Boston, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to rest a little bit. Then I'm going to plan for my next thing, which was the Berlin Marathon coming up in September. I'm going to get back on it. When I start my training, I'm not marathon training yet. I just started, you know, dipping my toes back into the triathlon training. So swim, bike, run, I'm lifting as well. But I don't have a specific race in mind for the triathlon yet. So for me, I would like to do these like mini series of, that's my Boston prep, check. This is my Berlin prep, check. This is my tri prep, check. So that's kind of how I'm going about the posting. And really just kind of documenting like my day-to-day and my life and my fitness endeavors. And I think really for me, like I said, it's to hold myself accountable, and it's to look back on one day when we're 75 and be like, remember that? I think that's really cool. But also what I found, and you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, is, you know, in an accidental sort of way, I've built a little community around myself and around my content of, hey, I'm in corporate America. I work they call it 9 to 5. It's 8 to 5. And, you know, I got, for someone, you know, a wife and kids or a husband and kids, and, you know, I don't have time to do X, Y, and Z. And the goal of the content in a, you know, sort of roundabout way is like, you do have time. It's all about prioritization, intentionality. Like you do have time. And it's easy for me to say, you know, not married, no kids, but I see some people online, we see it as well. Like, really successful people are doing really big endurance events. And in a way, I think that the endurance event sort of backdoors them into being insanely intentional and prioritizing everything like way up front. And I've found that when I'm on my endurance game, and we talked about this a little bit, I'm curious your thoughts, you know, with my girlfriend, with my career, like when I'm on my endurance game and I'm training, I am over communicating. I am scheduling everything on the calendar. I am so intentional with all of my time because you have to be. You have a career, you have a relationship, you have endurance goals, and you need to prioritize these different things. But you also need to show up as the best you for each one. And that can't happen unless you're intentional and you're prioritizing everything. So I'm curious, you know, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, like you were going through your training, and I remember specifically you ran like 20 miles one morning before work because it was the only time you could fit it in.
Yeah.
Can you possibly run 20 miles before work and then not be, you know, scheduled and dialed in the rest of your day? Probably not. I mean, you're going to be tired, but your brain's going to be firing and you're going to be on top of your shit because, you know, everything else is easy after that point. That's kind of how I look at it. It's like if I can knock out the hardest thing of my day, my first 2 workouts I like to do back to back is go get a lift in and then go get my run in. And then I'll start my day. Yeah. Because I go ahead and get that check mark, you know, cross that off the list for the day, and then I can go into it. But it's like, you can't be lazy the rest of the day because you've already started off so strong. Right. You know?
I totally agree. And that was a good example. And it was a morning that was raining. Like it was dark and rainy. And I was like, this is going to suck. And I knew it. I knew it going to bed. This is going to suck tomorrow. My girlfriend was like, I'll run 11 miles with you.
Nice.
So that was like one of her long runs before her half marathon. But yeah, she ran 11 or whatever it was with me. And I ran, you know, 20 or 18. I forget what it was that morning. But anyways, like you need to be insanely intentional with your time and with your training. And to your point, like I just think it makes everything better. Like the rest of the day, you're like, look, I took care of me. I took care of my training. I took care of my physical, you know, physical health. Like now I just got to worry about being a good, you know, whatever it is you're going into, whether it's a business meeting or, you know, relationship, whatever it is. Like, I got to worry about that. And there's a saying that it just clicked in my head. I may butcher it, but it's something along the lines of, you know, a rich man has many problems. A sick man has one.
To get better,
you gotta get healthy. Yeah, you gotta stay healthy. You know what I mean? I think that's the most important thing is like physical and mental health and wellness, which is sort of a key in core competency of this podcast. is like, you got to be healthy, man. You got to take care of you first. You got to be well. And if you're well, then you can handle anything that comes your way, really. Like if you're mentally and physically well, you can handle the turbulence, the unexpected turbulence ahead, you know?
Yes. Yeah. So true. And the beautiful thing about that too is like, you're not boasting, you're not bragging, but you're just sharing that's kind of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And again, it goes back to like, maybe that's what resonated with somebody to get them fired up, to get their ass off the couch. They're like, damn, it's 7 a.m. and this motherfucker ran 20 miles already and I'm just waking up and I'm groggy as shit. I feel like shit. But like, maybe that's the kick in the ass they need. And it's not being, again, braggadocious. It's not being any of this. It's just like, I'm just documenting what I'm doing. I'm working hard. I'm sharing that. And then hopefully somebody picks up on that and it motivates them to take it to the next level too.
Yeah. And it goes back to being authentic. Like that's real life. Like that was just, this is what we did. Like when you were training for your ultra, I think didn't you run twice in one day, like back-to-back long runs or something like that? Or maybe it was Saturday, Sunday, like 20 miles. Oh yeah. It was something like that. Like I remember seeing that and being like, this dude ran 20 miles yesterday and 20 again today at a sub 9-minute pace both times. Like how are his legs operating? Like I remember seeing that stuff and it's like motivating. Yeah. Like I would consider you a peer of mine in this thing, and it's motivating to see your peers go after a crazy goal that I knew scared you at the time. I knew that was a scary goal at the time.
That's a great point, is like, and that's where I think there's a disconnect, is because we see people doing this shit sometimes, but it's like a social celebrity or something. And you're just like, they're just on a different level. They're just a different category. But when you see your peers doing it, you're like, he's doing it, I can fucking do it. You know what I mean? For some odd reason, we need to see somebody we know doing it, and then sometimes it clicks. 100%. And it starts out in a weird thing because like, oftentimes it starts out and grows as like jealousy, because you're like, why, how does he have it together? How is he doing this? I should be doing this. 100%. But then like once it clicks, you realize, all right, there's no reason for me to get upset or, you know, feel like envious of this person, because there's no, you know, we grow together. Like you supporting me and vice versa is only going to help us grow together. You hating on me or vice versa is only going to breed hatred within yourself, and that's going to come out in different ways, whether it's irritation throughout your day, whether you're sitting in traffic, you fucking go off or whatever. Like that built up frustration and pent up frustration is just so useless. It's so useless. Like you should never get upset with somebody doing well, because that's an opportunity for you to use it as fuel for yourself, or to connect with them and learn how to grow and do what they're doing also, you know? Totally. So rather than shitting on somebody or doing, you know, feeling envious, you should reach out to them and like connect with them and see like, what are you doing that I'm not doing that maybe I could implement? 9 times out of 10, these people are going to absolutely, you know, be stoked to talk to you. We all want to talk about ourselves. It's easy to talk about ourselves. We definitely want to talk about our training just because that's how we're wired. I love talking about running. So you want to talk to me about the back-to-back 20? Let's go. It fucking sucked, but like that was the lead up for the 100. And like once it got done, it gets done. But I would love to talk about stuff like that. So like the outreach, I think, is something that's super important when it comes to the peer-to-peer thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's stuff like simple, like how did you approach this? Like, how do you approach a 20-mile run? Because some people, like we were fortunate, like Casey coached us and is still coaching you, I believe, at this time. And she's a wealth of knowledge. We'll have her on, I'm assuming, here shortly. Yeah. She's a wealth of knowledge in terms of like, not just running, like what runs you should do per week and speed versus zone 2 versus whatever, but the nutrition aspect of it, the hydration aspect of it, the recovery, the rest, like the PT aspect. Like she's been through it. She's run several marathons, ultras, whatever. Like she's seen it. So for me to have somebody, and I'm sure you do the same thing, to have a coach that is telling you like, here's how you recovered, here's the nutrition you need, here's what you need to do from a, you know, warm-up perspective and then a cool down to make sure you don't get injured. Like all of these things are extremely important. But if you're somebody who doesn't run or doesn't train or doesn't do whatever that we're posting about, and you see, you know, you followed Chase Price on, you know, February, whatever, and the dude ran 20 miles on Saturday and 20 miles on Sunday, you're going to be like, I can't do that. I can't do that. But the key is you can't do it yet.
Can't do it yet.
Can't do it yet. You can train for it. You just need to learn more. You need to understand more. You need to practice it. Like, it takes time. People see that. Like, if any new followers followed you in the last 3 months, they're probably like, this dude runs 1 million miles a month. Like, how is he able to do this? But I would argue 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
1 year ago.
Yeah, there you go.
I was not.
Whatever it was, right? Like, you were not able to get there. And that's not because you're not good at it. You're just not good yet. And we talked about this last week, is like, being authentic, being you, practicing things, experiencing more. Like, all of these things are super important, and you don't know what you don't know. So people get intimidated to start, and, having people who have a wealth of knowledge, like, just ask the question. They'll answer it.
Yeah. Great point. Is like, you're joining these people on their journey, well into their journey, very likely. I mean, they've grown their personal brand probably for months and months, sometimes years. And you look at them, and this goes back to the peer thing of like, why a peer doing it is just such a jump start for some people, because it's so close to home. But like, wherever you're picking up on their journey, just know like there's significant amount of work that's gone into that. It's not like they just picked up and they're there. Like, if they started following me, February, March of this year, where I'm running close to 100-mile weeks, a year ago, I was running maybe 3-mile weeks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't really training for anything. So there's just that story, and there's that journey behind it. And I'm just trying to tie this back into the personal branding, because I've documented that entire journey. You know what I mean? Pretty much from the jump, like, I've just started to document that. And so wherever you're joining me on the journey, you can go back and you can say, oh, in the summer, I documented my first 20-mile run, I think. You know what I mean? Made a video about running 20 miles. Then in March, I documented about going back-to-back Saturday, Sunday, 2020. You know what I mean? And it's like, I wasn't overnight, but you can see the progress. And that's what's so cool about building kind of the timeline, as you're talking about, to look back and say, here's where I was, here's where I'm at. I'm not really creating, I'm just more documenting, and people are flocking to that and connecting with that along the way.
Yeah. And just tying it, I totally agree. Tying it back to like those key strategies we talked about, just to summarize, like defining your identity. Like, what is your brand? What's your why? Understanding, your target audience and knowing how to sort of approach that, being consistent across platforms, across the frequency of your posts, across your message, being authentic, building a strong network, investing in your personal and professional development, and then just assessing and adjusting as needed. Yeah. Like, as I'm doing all these different things and I assess them and see what's working and what's not working, how do I adjust? And how do I adapt to what my goals are and where I need to be? And I think, if you put those together into like a plan to execute on it, if this is something you really want to do, whether it's entrepreneurship or social media or even in a career, corporate America, like, you'll be successful. You need a framework. You need to understand the framework. You need to execute on it, but you'll be successful. And that sort of ties me into my next question for you is, like, we talked a lot about success stories, but what are some things that, like, some pitfalls that people, or challenges that people run into when they first start? And like, did you have any, and can we help people avoid them as they go down this path?
You just touched on it as not having a framework. Going in and just saying, I'm going to create, 3 reels a week or whatever. That's a wonderful goal, and that's great to get started. But if you don't have a framework of saying, like, hey, on Monday afternoons is when I shoot, on Tuesdays is when I edit it, on this day is when I'm going to post. If you don't have that already built out beforehand, you're just going to flame out. Like, there's no way to be consistent without a plan. So it's being smart, having a plan, and then sticking to it. And that's where that consistency comes in. It's not just the posting consistency, it's everything that comes before that consistency. And again, trying to go too broad. That's the other thing, is like, niche down. Just talk about what you want to talk about. Talk about what you're passionate about, because there's a couple people that are also very passionate about that, who know a couple more people that would love to learn about what you're talking about.
Totally agree. Did you run into anything when you first started that was like, man, I wish I didn't do that, or next time around I'll avoid that?
There's plenty of stuff probably I wish I didn't do, but no, like, as far as the last 8 months or six to 8 months of posting about fitness stuff, that's what it is trial and error. When you're going, like, you're going to fuck up, and you're going to realize, like, hey, I should have been posting this way, or should have been doing this whole time. But like, you can't figure that out without just experimenting and messing around and trying different things and seeing what works for you. So there's nothing really that jumps out. It was just more of like, I wish it wouldn't have taken me so long to do what I'm doing. Because it's just fulfilling, man. When you start to see that people are connecting with you and you're growing the brand, it's like, it's a good feeling, but I just wish I would have started it, 2 years sooner.
Yeah. I find that to be a common sentiment across all, aspects of life is I wish I did this earlier. I wish I did this sooner, but, I would argue there's no right or wrong time, for you to do it. It's just like, hey, once you start, that's the right time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just start. And that's the key to anything is like, just start. Whether it's a personal brand, whether it's a company, whether it's whatever it is, just start and then figure it out along the way. Like, to your point, it's trial and error. You just have to start.
Yeah. And one last thing I would say about what could go wrong when you first get started is like, find out, I mentioned mine, figure out what your buckets are. Like I have 3 core buckets that I like to stick with, right? Which again is fitness, entrepreneurship, and family. And for me, like when I'm feeling my best creatively, it's because creating's easy for me because I'm sticking with my buckets. I'm staying in my lane. I don't really have to think about what I'm posting next because it's just authentic. It's like I'm just documenting what I'm doing. It fits in one of my core buckets. Boom, just throw it out there.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is just post and ghost. Like I don't even like to go see, I want to respond to people and comment back if they're reaching out and commenting, of course. But like, I just post and ghost and come back to it in an hour or two and then reply to comments and stuff like that. Because I think that's where I start to personally get, it becomes a little bit mentally taxing if I'm worried about numbers and I'm worried about all this. So I try to detach and like post and then go do something else and I'll come back later on. And that helps my process a little bit. But sticking with those core buckets is super important.
Totally agree. This has been, I think, educational for a lot of people. From a personal branding perspective, any last minute tidbits that you want to give out?
No, man. That was the last thing is just stay true to what is core to you and stay with those buckets. I think is super important. And don't be afraid to press the red button.
I love it. Well, great stuff, man. I appreciate the time. Super helpful and looking forward to the next one.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for your support on each and every episode of the Hybrid Human Podcast. It really means the world to us. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with new content moving forward.